Okay, who am I? So I'm Stuart Brooks, and I'm the chair of the IUCN UK Peatland Programme. I've been with the programme since its inception, and actually had some lovely nostalgic moments today when I saw Jim Ryan, and somebody mentioned Langlands Moss. So you know, this takes me back kind of 25 years or something like that. So the programme hasn't been going that long, but it's been going a long time. My day job is the Director of Conservation at the National Trust for Scotland. So it's a really interesting session that we've got between now and the break for the inspirational kind of arty stuff and the films and poetry and everything else. And we're going to have a look at progress against our UK Peatland Strategy. So I think this is probably a hen's teeth, isn't it? A kind of a hard copy. We don't do hard copies anymore, but we have one or two. So published yesterday. I'm looking at Renee because she's the only person I can see in the audience because I've got my my glasses on to read. Copies at the desk. Okay, great. So we're going to have a very quick kind of review, really, of the UK Peatland Strategy, and we're going to work that through with Jess and Helen from the Peatland Programme, and then we're going to have the opportunity to hear from and ask questions to our panel here, quite an extensive panel representing our 4 nation governments. So start thinking about questions now, because this is really kind of your session and the opportunity to ask questions and make comments. So the strategy itself, I mean, this community has really grown. I mean, this is a kind of fantastic engagement. And strategy was published back in 2018. So Emma, can't see Emma. Oh, she's down there. So Emma kind of gave birth to this strategy, if I can use that analogy. No, I can't. Okay. But she did. It was probably a little bit of an arduous labour, I don't know. I'm going to stop it now. But it's an umbrella framework, and you know, back in the earlier phases of the programme, we kind of felt this was an absolutely kind of necessary instrument for the programme. We've got this amazing community, but it's quite disparate, and we also absolutely kind of needed to kind of stimulate action, and some of that action was through policy. And we recognised that to do that, we needed some kind of umbrella, and we needed to set some ambitious targets. And the strategy has become a really solid foundation for policy and even some regulatory change. And so I'm going to hand over to, are we going with Jess first? Yeah. So Jess Fìor-Berry, if you changed your surname, just to catch me out. So Jess is going to step us through, or begin to step us through, some of the review of the strategy. So that was published in 2018, so literally hot off the press. And I think that's absolutely kind of crucial for us to kind of understand kind of where we are in terms of implementation of that strategy. And where we are in terms of meeting the milestones. So, over to you, Jess.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We're excited to present some of the headline findings this afternoon from the very recently published report, as Stuart has just said. So, if you haven't read it yet, don't worry. It is available online. There are some hard copies, so do pick one up, but cherish them, as there aren't many. So I'm the policy lead here at the programme, and I'm going to be talking through the 6 overarching aims from the original strategy, along with my colleague Helen. So I'll take the first part, and then Helen will walk you through the next 3 aims. So you've just heard briefly from Stuart an introduction about the original strategy and its aims. And so we're now just over 5 years on from the publication of that strategy, and we're about 15 years away now from the, I should have put that part up, sorry, from the 2040 target that you can see up there of 2 million hectares of peatland in good condition, under restoration or sustainably managed. So it's a great time to reflect on the successes and challenges that we faced in meeting the objectives of the strategy. So in the course of writing the report, we gathered significant amounts of data and analysed this, and we'd like to thank our NGO and governmental partners for their support in providing the non-publicly available data. There have been significant successes, some of which you've heard about today, and some challenges as well, which you've also heard about. What I would say is that we've got to see the progress report not as criticism, but of critique. There's a passionate and committed peatland community. Many of you are here today with us, and we can use this as an opportunity now to reflect, to grow, and to progress. So the first aim is conservation. To understand where we're currently at, we analysed data largely derived from condition data from monitoring of designated sites such as SSSI and SAC. We found that across the UK, condition was quite variable. Some countries seem to have a greater proportion of favourable sites. However, common across the UK countries is that many of the assessments are older than the 6 years, which is recommended by the JNCC under Common Standards Monitoring. There's been some lack of resourcing. Monitoring remote peatlands is expensive, for one, but there's also been lower uptake in some of the skills, such as botanical ID, that are required to monitor these sites. So that means it's falling to fewer people to monitor larger areas. But it's important that we tackle these issues in order to understand whether the public money that we're spending through agri-environment schemes and through restoration grant schemes is delivering effectively towards things like the 2030 targets. So it's important that we have these robust programs in place, bringing these assessments up to date. And there is progress across the countries in these, with significant investment underway in some areas to bring these up to date. It's not all doom and gloom though. This year, as you've heard mentioned, the Flow Country peatlands were designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Once threatened by forestry, it cements the global importance of the world's most extensive blanket peatland, and that is something in conservation that should absolutely be applauded. The second overarching aim is restoration. Data was quite difficult to aggregate for this area, as we found it was quite fragmented and quite piecemeal in many places, and what it highlighted is the need for a database where this can be gathered and shared centrally. However, we are able to report that since the 1990s, we've now restored over 250,000 hectares of UK peatlands. That's a massive collective achievement. It shows that we can deliver at scale, but we must now further scale that effort and at pace in line with the targets set by both the UK governments and from the recent Climate Change Committee report. We'll need an estimated 8 billion to fully restore the UK's peatlands. Happily, private finance is now playing a role in restoration, and we have 300 peatland code projects now registered, but more funding will be needed to give contractors, as you've heard today, the confidence to upskill and purchase the machinery to increase the capacity to meet these ambitious targets that have been set. We also need a scientifically underpinned definition of what restored means. For example, what area is functionally restored when we block X amount of grips or ditches. So my final aim to talk you through is sustainable management. We hit the 2020 milestone of inclusion of peatlands in the greenhouse gas inventory, meaning that we now understand the contribution that peatlands make to UK carbon emissions, which is an important step on the road towards net zero. But we need a UK land use framework to support land users and land managers to make environmentally sound decisions to protect both biodiversity and their livelihoods, particularly important in areas like the Fens. We have achieved legislation to limit burning in both England and Scotland, but we have unfortunately stalled towards the horticultural peat ban, and we do need to ensure that this is progressed. Finally, for sustainable management, we need a unified definition of peatland, Currently, we're often relying on depth, and it is between 30 and 50 centimetres across the UK, and it's applied variably depending on which sector we're talking about. This raises the spectre of unfair treatment, and it risks undermining our conservation goals and objectives. So thank you for listening to me. I'm going to hand you over to Helen.
Thank you, Jess. So I will be moving on to the next goal, which is adaptive management. So in the context of our strategy, adaptive management refers to shifting the management of drained peatlands that are currently under intensive productive use to deliver wetter ways of farming, also known as paludiculture. Paludiculture is a topic that has gained significant traction, particularly in England, where partnerships between ENGOs, farmers, growers, and government agencies are currently delivering inspirational projects to demonstrate the potential for adaptive management of UK peatlands. Arguably, to date, England has made the most investment in exploring the potential for paludiculture, as can be seen on the map behind me. So all the blue dots represent current paludiculture trials, and you can see they're all concentrated in England. The current trials and the application of technology in these trials is truly impressive and inspiring. A range of potential paludiculture crops suitable for growing in the UK have been identified, as you can see from the table. And paludiculture research and trial projects have attracted over £24 million in the last couple of years, since 2018. So a lot of progress has been made. However, wetter farming is not yet being delivered at scale, and we feel that there are significant opportunities for more sustainable farming on peatland that are currently being missed. As agri-environment schemes are being produced, it is encouraging to hear discussions that new measures will be implemented to support re-wetting and to stop damaging draining practices. Without this explicit support within these agri-environment schemes, it is unlikely that land managers will be confident enough in adopting sustainable peatland paludiculture at scale on agricultural peat soils in the short to medium term at least. It is important to remember, especially in challenging economic and political times, that public engagement is still key to all of this. So our next overarching goal is communication. And with the huge number of partners that are now engaged and involved in peatlands across multiple sectors, it should be even easier to engage the public in peatland issues if we all share our expertise and communicate to plan for effective engagement. Public awareness and support for peatland conservation and management objectives is critical to the successes of the UK Peatland Strategy targets. So there are things to celebrate here. Our report shows that peatlands have increasingly been featured in the media, and there is an increasing public interest in peatlands over the past 5 years. So you can see from the graphs that Google searches of peatland and peatland-related themes have been increasing, particularly since 2018. Peat-related topics have also been increasingly involved in discussions in the UK Parliament. So the word peatlands has been mentioned in parliamentary debates about 213 times since 2018. However, this is almost 4 times lower than the number of mentions of the word woodlands within the same time period. Organisations and peatland partnerships across the UK continue to build the resource and work to increase understanding of peatlands at the local, regional and national levels. And it is very encouraging to show this good progress that has been made in this area and the fact that the PT message is getting out. And this brings us to our final overarching goal, which is coordination. So currently, 3 of 4 UK's nations now have a country-specific peatland strategy. And these strategies reflect the overarching objectives and aims of the UK Peatland Strategy. They're key documents that shape and design the conservation of the UK's peatlands today. So Northern Ireland is the only one of the four yet to formalise a peatland strategy. However, they have produced a draft strategy for consultation back in 2021. So the production of these strategies has stimulated the formation of new peatland partnerships and peatland delivery. And there are now coordinating peatland partnerships across almost all of the peatland areas of Great Britain, as you can see from the map behind me. In Northern Ireland, NGOs and public bodies are working together to deliver peatland objectives. So we need to ensure that we continue to have the skills, the staff and the resources to maintain and enhance the current peatland momentum that we have all worked very hard to establish. So there have been positive trends, especially in the size of the peatland sector. So our report finds that the number of job ads for peatland-related jobs in the UK has increased significantly since 2018. The number of jobs has actually more than doubled within the past 4 years. And there has been a gradual increase in the number of permanent positions as well. However, we still have some concern about the retention of peatland expertise, as a number of experts are reaching a retirement age, and short-term funding threatens the retention of experts within their existing roles. As was highlighted in the restoration chapter, we know that funding is not yet at the level to meet existing targets, and budgets within the sector are frequently squeezed. Short-term funding packages are welcomed as a temporary measure, but for example in England, the variety and the complexity of the public funding landscape can create a barrier for efficiency and delivery. So logically, the simplification of funding mechanisms and the long-term certainty of funding availability will be key to scaling up delivery and improving the efficiency of peatland conservation and sustainable management. We have already seen the early successes of peatland action style models being rolled out in Scotland and Wales to coordinate delivery at the national level. However, policy swings and budget cuts still pose issues across all 4 nations. And finally, the academic community is also critical in bringing peatland science to the fore and for providing the evidence base for effective policy. So based on publicly available data, we report in our peatland strategy that peat-themed research projects have been awarded over £25 million since 2018 by UK-based funding bodies such as NERC. However, the real figure is likely to be at least double that, as not all of this information is publicly available. We also know that around 100 peat-themed scientific publications are published in the UK every year, and you can see that peatland restoration is a topic that is gaining more attention in scientific publications as well. You can see that on the graph behind me. So to conclude, our overall assessment is that we are not currently on the trajectory we need to be in ensuring UK peatlands are able to fully realise their role in tackling the climate and nature crisis. But we also must not lose sight of the fact that we have demonstrated across all of these areas that we can deliver. The 250,000 hectares of restoration action which has taken place to date is something to be celebrated. We hope that you will find the progress report a useful resource and a talking point as we reflect on where we are and where we need to be. In the panel discussion that now follows, we will discuss some of these findings and how progress across all 4 countries can be scaled to deliver against international commitments, domestic targets, and the UK Peatland Strategy 2040 goal of 2 million hectares of peatland in good condition, under restoration, or being sustainably managed by 2040. Thank you.
Too many people, not enough chairs. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Jess, and thank you, Helen. So I do want to continue to involve Jess and Helen in the conversation. So if you've got a question for Jess and Helen, I'm very happy to direct it to them as part of the overall discussion here. Okay, just give me an indication. Who's got questions? Okay, we need more questions. That's fine. I'll come back. I'll come back to you, but you need to start thinking. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, and thank you for all the work, and thank you, Emma, as well, for both the original strategy and kind of helping with this review. I hope, kind of panel, you feel, and our community here feel that it's an honest account, and we just so happen to have part of our community up on the stage, you know, representing the 4 nations, but equally we could have had a panel of scientists, or a panel of practitioners, or a panel of community activists, because we all have a role in delivering this strategy. So it's not their strategy, it's our strategy. And I just kind of wanted to emphasize that. All right, so I'm going to start, and I'm looking at Manon, and she knows that I'm going to go to her first, so there's no surprise. But Manon, just give us, from your perspective, from the perspective of Wales, a little bit of a kind of, all right, this has just landed in my inbox. How do we feel about this?
Diolch yn fawr, thank you. So I'm Manon Lewis, and I'm the Strategic Projects Manager in NRW, and I head the Nature Recovery Group in the organisation. So I'm very fortunate within my group that I've got the Natur and Byth programme, which is a species recovery programme, and the National Peatland Action Programme as well. So very fortunate to have those areas under my wing, as it were. So in terms of the report, I think we genuinely do welcome the report and welcome the frankness within it as well. You know, it's holding our feet to the fire. And again, it just brings home the message of we need to do a lot more at a much quicker pace. We're very fortunate in Wales. We have a fantastic commitment from Welsh Government and the Welsh Government officials there. So in terms of that perspective, we're very fortunate, and that we hope to go on from strength to strength, because we do have a commitment in Wales to upscale the Peatland programme. So both financially, in terms of the grants we award and the land management agreements, and also in terms of bringing a lot more staff into NRW and other organisations as well. So really upscaling the boots on the ground and getting delivery done. So in terms of the report itself, I suppose we would say that we're in a fairly early stage still in Wales, in year 4 of a 5-year programme. But that programme is going to be continuing, and we have commitment to at least 2030 to carry on the work. So we do recognise the challenges of assessing the condition of peatlands at scale as well, and that is definitely highlighted in the report. And we would like to see kind of better advances, and we'd like to be part of the better advances in remote sensing techniques, for example. We're especially, or we do welcome very much so, the fact that the report recognises the lack of a UK-wide definition for peatland, and has also highlighted the importance of shallow peat. And that's especially important for us in Wales. We have a lot of development pressures, as I'm sure you all do here as well. But that is something that we're very keen to progress, working with Welsh Government colleagues through Planning Policy Wales, etc., to better define that and protect our peat resource. We feel that the shallower peat is an intrinsic part of the whole system and deserves to be recognised. So again, we you know, in terms of designating further, and that the report's ambition, I think, was for 95% of peatlands to be designated. Absolutely, we see the value of designation and designating sites in Wales. But I guess we haven't really actively progressed that aspect. But we are working very closely again with Welsh Government colleagues through the biodiversity deep dive and everything else to get the 30 by 30 target in place as well. So we see that as a key area for us to develop. And the last but not least, I guess the hypermodified in Wales, we've not really progressed on that side, and the wetter farming we've already heard about, and that our English colleagues have progressed. But again, with the upscaling of the programme and getting staff in place, we hope to progress that aspect as well. So, diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you.
Thank you, Manon. Right, so I'm clearly making this up as I go along. So what we're going to do is, and Manon did the right thing, she introduced herself, which is great. And so I'm going to look to you after we've kind of had a little intervention from the panel. If anybody kind of feels that they've got a particular kind of comment or question which is kind of prompted by something the panel member has said, just put your hand up and then we'll go to you. So I'd much rather do it like that so we can have a bit of interaction rather than just me asking questions and then opening it up to you. So let's try it, shall we? So is it any, can I see any hands yet? You don't have to put your hand up. Yes, all right. So Ed, got two questions down here, I think, or maybe they're just the ones that I saw. So if you handed the mic, if you wouldn't mind standing up and then just introduce yourself, and then I think this is something to do with, I don't know, us knowing where you are in the room. So go for it, and then ask your question.
Hello, is that working? My name is Miriam Kaiwesh-Reeve and I'm with Forestry and Land Scotland. And I'm just curious to understand a bit more about the timeline for defining peatlands, especially those shallower peats, because it's really important from a kind of regulatory perspective, working in Scotland, as we're currently working to 50 centimetres as being deep peat. But obviously there's an understanding hydrologically, ecologically, biologically, that there's value in these shallower peats. So is there a timeline?
Good question. So would anybody like to respond to that?
I think I got the look, Stuart.
Okay, go for it, Peter.
Peter Hutchinson from Nature Scott. I don't think we have got a timeline for resolving this, but I think you're right. There are a number of definitions of peat. You know, there's the 50 centimetres that we're working to. The Muirburn Code uses 40 centimetres, and then we've got 30 centimetres elsewhere. So I think it's a good question. I haven't got a timeline, but I will liaise with Heather afterwards and we'll try and get a timeline and come back to you. But it's a good question, Stuart. There is confusion out there over different definitions of peat.
Yeah, so this is something, and I'm looking at Emma here, you know, this is something that absolutely kind of falls into our camp because it's a common problem. It needs some thinking, it needs some coordination, probably needs some science, and so it's the kind of thing that we can help with. So yeah, look to us as well. So okay, all right, put that on our to-do list. Chris, I think you had a question as well. I don't know everybody's name, by the way. It's just lucky.
Thanks. My name's Chris Miller. I work for Natural England, but I've been working on peatlands for the past 21 years, so a little while. My question's actually more, and just thanks to the IUCN team, first of all, for that fantastic strategy presentation. It was really good to see the update, warts and all. It was really valuable, so thanks, guys. My question is, what strategy do you have for developing and retaining peatland expertise? We've all seen the scale of the challenge. We're going to have to still massively upscale beyond the upscaling we've already done, and we've gone huge strides already. And there just doesn't seem to be that place for retaining peatland expertise, and particularly about that expertise implementing into peatland policy. you know, I've seen a big churn in policy people. You know, the people who sat in front of us weren't the people there 4 years or even 10 years ago. You know, there's a continuing change there of people. And you know, how do we put peatland expertise at the forefront, particularly when we have questions about, you know, definitions of what peat is and the peat depth? Thank you.
Okay, anyone want to have a crack at that? Yeah, go for it.
So, hi, I'm Craig Rockcliffe, National Peatland Manager in the Environment Agency. Good question. We certainly have a national team, fantastic national team, over 120 years worth of experience in managing and working with peat elements. They are the tip of an iceberg of the rest of the Environment Agency staff who, in their sort of biodiversity roles or environment programme roles, they are also picking up elements of peat. So it's a bit of a plug here, really. If you're interested in peat and you fancy working for the Environment Agency and learning about other things alongside your peat development, then knock on our door. There might be some opportunities. Thank you very much.
Okay, fine. Everybody rush. Okay, Fiona, I'm going to look to you now because reading the strategy review and thinking about, you know, one of its primary objectives, which was to stimulate the development of national plans, and Northern Ireland's been a little constrained and kind of challenged in that area for a couple of years. So it's maybe your opportunity to tell us about where you are on that journey.
Thank you, Stuart. Yes, I'm Fiona Dixon. I'm Deputy Director of Natural Environment Policy in DERA, Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. I have a remit in sustainable land management, and peatland policy is one part of that. But the important thing about my policy, and this is one of the things that I'm challenged with every day, is the policy coherence piece, where I also am looking at how we can manage our land, not just for biodiversity or for carbon, but also for air quality, water quality, and soil health. So that all falls in my remit, and peatland, I think, is one of the really key parts of us achieving many of those other big overarching goals that we have that we're challenged by in Northern Ireland. And if we could get peatland restoration right, we could get our carbon reduction and our climate change targets right, we could get our biodiversity right, get our water quality right, which has been a big issue for us very publicly recently. So the good news from Northern Ireland, and probably since you were last updated last year at your conference, is that we, as you know, have now a functioning executive, and we have a minister in place who's an agriculture minister but also an environment minister, and is very passionate about the environment, making sure we get the balance right between agriculture and food production and the environment. So for that reason, we are in the process of finalising our peatland strategy, which I know was referred to as being consulted on a number of 3 years ago, but we've been working on developing it and making sure it aligns with other strategies, and for instance our draft environmental improvement plan that we have, and making sure that the targets in the peatland strategy align with that, just to make sure that we have that policy coherence and that our targets are delivering for all of those other aspects of land management. So we're in the process of trying to take our strategy to the minister and also then to the executive. It is cross-cutting. It needs to be approved around the executive table, and that's really a reflection of the scale of funding that we're very envious of, that Scotland were talking about earlier on, but the scale of funding and the other elements that come from other government departments that we need agreement around that table. So the good news is we have a minister who is is working towards a number of different new policies and strategies being published that where we were really stuck and not able to progress without an executive in place. So that's where we are. If that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. And so I might look to Scotland, Heather, or Peter. I think one of the benefits of having 4 different plans and possibly even at 4 different stages of evolution is that we can learn from each other. And so are there kind of aspects, I guess, of what we've learned in Scotland that might benefit Fiona in Northern Ireland in terms of the evidence that we can kind of begin to kind of generate, you know, in particular, which kind of points towards, probably from a politician's perspective, the social in particular and economic benefits as well as the environmental. I don't know, you know, whether that's something, you know, that you've kind of been on a journey on yourselves. I'm sure you have. So yeah, and any kind of learnings from Scotland for Northern Ireland.
Hello, I'm Heather Perman. I'm from Scottish Government in the Peatland Restoration Delivery Team. We were actually talking about this earlier, about learning the lessons and sharing. Immensely proud to be part of the Peatland Action Partnership, and you've heard all the successes, so I won't go over that again. You heard from the speakers earlier, but just to kind of echo the successes we've had, and as well as acknowledging the challenges that we've got ahead. And I think we can learn from the successes, you know, to take us into those challenges. In terms of your question about data, I think a few people have commented on that, and I think it came out in the strategy, the challenges we've got there, and we've got that as well. I would maybe highlight the Nature Scot data portal that manages all the Peatland Action data portal that manages all our projects. Sorry, I'll this properly. Is a great example of where we're kind of pulling all our projects together and that kind of intel. We've actually spoken to colleagues about that as well. So yeah, happy to share and to talk more. There's lots happening. Yeah, I could probably go on a lot more about data and evidence, but I'll leave it at that, if that's okay.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, I think we might have 1 or 2 questions online. Is that right? Yeah? Have you got a microphone? Emma, you can have this one.
A couple of questions online. Thank you, Jess. I've got no hands to put my seat down. That would have been embarrassing. So I'll just start with the first one while we're with Scotland. So there's a question from Andrew Midgley from RSPB Scotland, and it's framed specifically for Scotland, but I think it's probably relevant, and I'll frame it slightly differently to make it relevant to all of the countries. And essentially, Andrew's sort of saying that the various governments have set restoration targets for annual delivery of restoration. And the Committee on Climate Change has also made recommended targets to be able to meet net zero and other policies that are set in place. So there's a contradiction between those 2 figures, that the national targets from government tend to not match the level of ambition that's set out by Committee on Climate Change. So I guess Andrew's asking, are the governments actually failing to deliver, despite saying that, he quotes a Scottish example, but I think similar comments have been made elsewhere, that the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss represent the existential threat of our times. So that's kind of quite a frank question from Andrew, but really it's reflecting on the discrepancy between government communicated targets and commitments versus the recommendations from the science, I guess. Right,
who wants to go first? Peter.
Yeah, I'm itching to get in here. Within Scotland, we've got 2 targets. We've got 110,000 by 2026 and 250,000 hectares by 2030. At the moment, we're only delivering 10,000 hectares a year. So to meet those targets, we have to start accelerating, transforming how we operate to get into the 30,000 to 35,000 hectares a year. So our challenge is to move from where we're at the moment and treble the amount of delivery that we're doing. The good thing is we're working from good foundations. As Claudia mentioned this morning, we have now got a demand But what we need to do is work out how do we support that demand. So we need to do more design of projects. We need to look at funding, bringing in private investment, but also looking at whether we can do the projects for less money. So we've got to look at efficiencies. So I think it's fair to say our current rate of progress is not sufficient to meet these targets. But our challenge, and it's a challenge collectively for this room, is how do we change our operating model so that we will meet those targets? And I welcome the invitation to work with you, Stuart.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up in a second. I just wanted to make an additional comment, really. So I think we all want to kind of upscale and accelerate, but there is also a fragility in the system in our Peatland Code. So, you know, we're kind of operating really kind of on the edge of our capacity. And I think if we're looking to leverage private finance to kind of get us to that kind of next step in terms of activity levels, I suspect that will place a very significant increased demand on the code and our ability to support that demand. So I'm just kind of putting it out there as another factor I think collectively, you know, we need to consider, because at the moment the code is kind of on the edge of its capacity. Anyway, all right, did anybody else kind of want to respond to, I guess, the kind of challenge of where we are in terms of targets and the targets that you set yourselves and the kind of targets which others might be kind of looking to the Peatland community to deliver? Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Caulfield. I head up the peatland restoration team at DEFRA in England. I think we're at an interesting point in our targets. We've obviously got our long-term 2050 target, which is tied into the net zero targets, but we did in the previous government have targets to 2025, which we are falling behind, and I think we wouldn't get away from the fact that we need to accelerate, like we say, if we're going to get towards those long-term targets. I think in terms of the sort of achievability of our targets, it will be interesting to engage with our new ministerial team and test their ambition towards targets. They've only been in place a short time, and we've had some really early engagement with them where they have ambitions, but how that translates into policies, we haven't yet had the time to see. But that might inform how we're kind of looking ahead to our targets. And then equally, we're having a spending review settlement at the moment, and what we get within that will influence again how much we can accelerate and what that pace of change will be. But I think seeing some of the Scotland targets are huge and so vast, that's really interesting to see.
Okay, all right. Manon, did you want to add something?
Very briefly, thank you. So in terms of the targets for Wales and the agreed targets with Welsh Government, we're hitting those. And we've got, again, through the Minister and the Biodiversity Deep Dive, the targets in there. So we're fairly comfortable with that in terms of the upscaling plan as well. But there are targets elsewhere that are put upon us, as has already been said. So this is the point where I really wish my policy colleagues were with me, but they're not today. So other than to say that there's an active dialogue going on between my policy colleagues and Welsh Government's policy colleagues on the other targets outside Welsh Government as well. Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to... I'll come back to the audience in 2 seconds. I just wanted a question around the lowlands. So we were in Ely last year for this conference, and I think a number of us were, I guess, kind of a little bit taken aback by what we saw in terms of the agricultural fens. It's a long way from the flow country to the fens. So I think we're all quite interested in the context of the kind of sustainability objective or the sustainable management objective within the strategy, just to understand whether there's been kind of any significant progress made in terms of supporting sustainable management, in particular of lowland peatland. So I think that's an England question, but
So, yeah, Craig Rockliffe from Environment Agency. So, the Lowland Agricultural peat, yes, the Environment Agency is doing a huge amount of work on this. First of all, we are rolling out a variety of grants, which are with our landowners and partners for water discovery pilots across large swathes of England to identify, working with the community, and that's the most important thing here, working with the community to fight for them to put forward their ideas and concepts as to how they could exist within a slightly wetter domain. A mosaic of different approaches between areas of land which they wish to retain to be dry and those to be wet. At the same time, we're also undertaking a huge amount of research and development into these areas with consultants to get some facts, get some evidence, because without strong, really clear evidence as the optimum way forwards, we're not going to achieve what we want to really achieve for these communities. So the Environment Agency is very heavily embroiled in that at the moment, and we are expecting our results to be coming through end of March 2025, and we of course will be making sure we share that with this community, with the communities we're working with on the ground, and working with our partners to ensure that we're all learning. Thank you.
Okay, John, yeah.
Hi everyone, John Butterfield, Natural England. I'm a Principal Manager in the Peatland team in Strategy and Government Advice. My team oversees delivery of the Nature Climate Peatland Grant Scheme, Polyculture Exploration Fund, a peat restoration roadmap, and then some peat protection advice to government on burning, heather and grass management. So obviously in this context we're heavily involved in the Polyculture Exploration Fund. Everybody has probably heard that. There's many people here who's probably in that fund. 12 projects all on track at the moment. Yeah, a good amount of budget there for that research and development to help communities transition into that wetter farming. Like we've already heard, there is, we've done a lot. There is, yeah, we need to continue that momentum. So at the moment we are looking at options to try and to increase that, but as ever, and working with partners in government, we're all subject to how much money we get from spending reviews, so that's kind of where we are with that. We're also, one thing to mention as well, we're trying to work on a collective vision in the Lowlands with the Environment Agency and DEFRA so basically we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Sometimes that's not as clear as it can be, but it's, I think moving forward, that getting that vision in place would get us the delivery we need.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, so stimulated a few hands. Lady in the green towards the back.
Hi, I'm Sarah Johnson, Head of Peat and Nature Recovery for Lancashire Wildlife Trust. Yeah, so kind of in relation to what we talked about, like definitions of peat and how we meet targets and value stuff, and about the lowlands, my question is kind of around protection and valuation of our lowland peat. So it's two things. Firstly, we're wanting the panel's feedback on why sort of lowland raised bog in particular, which we have a lot of in the northwest, is not on the list of irreplaceable habitats from the side of the B&G, and also that there seems to be sort of a need to recognise the value of peat soils when they're not recognised as lowland raised bog or fen peat in a habitat listing, but from a planning point of view, they are not protected. So when it becomes to sort of the Greater Manchester place for everyone planning allocation, the development's been put forward on agricultural peat soils because the peat soils and the potential value of those peat soils is not really recognised. So we had sort of developers and their lawyers arguing that it was better to build on those peat soils because that would reduce the carbon emissions, because they're comparing against the emissions that have been sort of talked about from agricultural peat in the sort of, you know, a current drained state. So I think in order to meet the targets, we need to have more of a think about how we protect the peat soils themselves, not just the habitat, you know, titles, as it were. So it'd be interesting to get the panel's thoughts on that and how we're going to move forward on that part. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That feels like an English policy question.
Yeah, one thing we're doing in Natural England, we've been putting into the National Planning Policy Framework to try and get those there's additional peat soils in there, and recognised. It may not come to protection, but it would be recognised in the planning policy. And it's actually there's a ask, and I know it's focused on the workshops later in this conference, but there is an ask, kind of, I guess, from the audience in helping us understand those shallow peat soils. I know we've traditionally focused on the deeper peats, and quite rightly, but obviously we do need to start getting to that space where shallow peat soils are communicated more widely, researched more widely, and then that's where we can then use that evidence to feed into policy decisions.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I was quite glad that someone asked this question, I hope they would, to plug. So the National Planning Policy Framework, MHCLG, are doing a consultation at the moment, and it's centred around the renewable policy of the government, but we were able to put a question in there about the protection of peat soils from a sort of renewable perspective, and if that's going to happen, you know, thoughts on compensatory measures or just the protections that should be extended to peat soils. So I think the consultation's still open until next week, but it would be really good to get peaty thoughts obviously fed into that as well.
Okay. Scottish perspective then, because we have a lot of shallow peat, and this is a conundrum which comes up in all sorts of kind of land use decisions. So is there anything that you kind of want to share?
The National Planning Framework, our fourth National Planning Framework, does actually protect our peat soils. But as the other panel have mentioned, it's focused on the deeper peat. So those are the types of peat that has got the most protection. Like all aspects of protection, it's about protecting the peatland resource also with development at the moment. And we're actually reviewing our guidance on peat and development. So that's Nature Scot working with the Scottish Government to revise our guidance on peat and development. So the National Planning Framework is good, but it only takes it so far.
Yeah, as an issue in general, I know this is something that the programme has identified. How we quantify the value of shallow peat and actually understanding the loss as much as anything. So buried a little bit in the back of the strategy review, there's a statement or a question about we're not systematically actually recording the loss of our peatland. So I think we're much better now at recording where we've restored it. So there is an equation there, isn't there? So that's something that I would like to see us collectively doing. It's being much clearer actually about where we're losing peat, and probably a lot of that is in quite shallow peat. So I kind of hope we'll have some answers to that in the next strategy review. Anyway, that's just a statement. Okay, I think we had another couple of hands, so lots of hands now. Don't know how we manage that. Who's got the longest hand? Okay, chap at the back in the grey shirt. Yeah.
David Lars, University of Nottingham. It's all very good and well having targets, they stimulate action, etc. But I'm not hearing a lot about optimisation within our landscape, optimisation with respect to the climate. An example of that would be soils with no peat. You will never grow peat faster than when it is initiated. Yet you only consider thresholds where there is peat. There may be areas that could be optimised with no peat, if that's the optimal place in a landscape. But where are we considering the optimisation of our landscapes for carbon storage?
Beyond trees. Yeah. Okay. Anybody got a response? John? Yeah. Great. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So, very good question. I think in England we can look to the local nature recovery strategies as one opportunity where the local authorities, in combination with the wildlife trusts and other partners, are identifying the opportunities that there may exist. Amongst that range of different opportunities, there are some for peat. We have placed into the local nature recovery strategy advice for all local authorities a guidance for peat and what it means and the opportunities, and we're hopeful that that will produce some interesting concepts moving forward, but it's one to watch. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take another question from, okay, lady here in the white and blue striped top.
Hi, I'm Hannah McGrath from the Joint Nature Conservation Committee. I suppose a bit of the elephant in the room so far is how we get the long-term funding when governments and finances change. And so I suppose the thing I'd be interested in the panel's reflections on is how reliant you think you will be on the cultural community engagement, the artistic endeavours that we've heard about today, and how you think that those could be used to build support for getting the cash for the optimisation of the landscape or the peatland restoration.
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting question, and I guess kind of plays to public awareness and consciousness of the values. Who would like to say something about that? Fiona, maybe?
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's a very good question, and it's something that we're looking at in Northern Ireland at the moment. Again, as always, very early stages of looking at private finance and how that might work for us in terms of peatland restoration, given the fact that funding cycles are short in government traditionally. And we are trying to look at much longer term management plans, particularly for restored peat once it has been restored. So it is a challenge, and it's one of those things that I think has really been highlighted here today, is that sense of community engagement and really getting community buy-in, and it's something that we know we have a big challenge ahead with in Northern Ireland. 75% of our land is farmland in Northern Ireland, and most of those farmers are the land managers that we will be asking to come along with us to restore their land, their peatland, and it's trying to give them that security and I suppose promise is maybe too strong a word, but that there will be funding if they start that journey with us. So I think my answer to your question, Hannah, is probably yes, we will have to definitely look at those other sources of funding, and you know I think the ingenuity and the variety of different ways of funding that was highlighted today, has brought home that we can't rely. We know there's not enough money, public money in government, for us to rely on achieving the really challenging peatland targets that we have, and we will have to look at those other sources. And I mean, it's one of those things that I think by working, as 4 countries together, that's where the learning is. We can learn from what has been going on before in Scotland and England and Wales, and we can hopefully bring that home to Northern Ireland as well.
Okay, I think we'll maybe stick with a kind of financy theme. Yeah, is that a financy kind of question?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, Ed's just coming to you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Matthew Cook. I work for the Future Forest Company. I'm based in Scotland. I've been restoring peatland for many years. We've heard a little bit about the Permaculture Exploration Fund in England. We heard an excellent question there about optimisation. I know in Scotland that there are quite a significant number of peatland extraction sites which are either still extracting, licenses coming to an end, or have stopped extracting, but the restoration, so-called, was maybe to a standard that was acceptable 10 or 20 years ago. I think that when I'm standing on a hillside surveying some peatland, an otherwise healthy blanket bog, with a few drains in it. I can get government money for that. I can also get carbon peatland code money for that. But I'm standing looking down on 100 hectares of black peat that I can't get government money for or carbon money for. And if you use the emissions factors of the peatland code, that 100 hectares of black peat is releasing a lot of carbon. If we were to restore that along polluter-culture lines, we could also have benefits for food, fibre, local work, biodiversity, as well as carbon. That's 5 wins. As part of the Scottish strategy, will you be opening a similar polluter-culture exploration fund for sites like that?
Okay, I'm going to put that question to Emma.
I wasn't wanting to
Because she
answer
told
it
me to.
directly. Thank you, Stuart. But we've got a couple of related questions online, so just to give our online attendees a bit of time as well. So 2 similar related questions to what Matthew just posed. There's a question online from Chiara Laverty. Does DARA, Northern Ireland Executive, have any plans to halt commercial peat extraction in Northern Ireland? And then a similar related question again to what Matthew was just highlighting. Are Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales planning to invest in polluter-culture or wetter farming?
Okay. I was going to... Renee's scared looking at me now, because I was going to ask her to respond to the polluter-culture question with regard to the Peatland Code. Is that all right? Yeah?
That wasn't my question. My question was whether Nature Scott and the government are going to come up with a strategy. I understand why we can't...
Can we give him a mic, please?
I understand why we can't use the Peatland Code on sites that might have a legal obligation to restore, which is why I'm saying that Nature Scott and the government might want to put a fund together so that we can actually restore those things and that there is an incentive. I'm not saying the Peatland Code should be doing it or that the government should just be giving Peatland Action money away, but I think due to the amount of benefits we could get out of that, that a polluter-culture exploration fund in Scotland would be extremely useful.
Okay, thank you. All right. Heather, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's one for me to take away and have a think about. And I probably can't say much more than that, but I will take that idea away and we'll investigate and maybe reach out. Maybe we can have a chat about that.
It's an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Right, another hand at the back.
Hi, Carlos from Silvera. We're a carbon market regulation company, and I'm working on developing a framework for assessing the quality in peatland-based carbon projects. So I have another question about the financing of peatland restoration. We've heard about using financing from the voluntary carbon market to enable peatland restoration in order to reach, in part, UK's net zero targets. I'm wondering if financing is coming from the VCM, the voluntary carbon market. Presumably the carbon from those peatland restoration projects will have already been used to offset emissions somewhere from whoever's retiring that credit that they bought. So how can we avoid double counting if we're using those same VCM funded peatland restoration projects against UK's net zero targets?
I don't know whether anybody's got an answer to that. You might have to provide the answer. Nobody want to respond? John, you're looking like you're on the edge of responding. Go on for it. Go for it, yes. Yeah?
Sorry.
Go for it, Renee. Just introduce yourself as well.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Renee Kirkfleet, I'm Peatland Code Manager for the IUCN UK Peatland Programme. So the way that we work in the UK on the voluntary carbon market is that our projects are whole, we say, like, if you buy a carbon unit as a company, that you are helping the UK meet their net zero targets. So it's like, that's very clear. So we know we need to reduce our emissions and we know we need to do that. And our peatlands are obviously a massive issue there. So it's about how you account for that. But if you would take it off the UK greenhouse gas inventory, it would not be accounted for anywhere, because those individual companies don't have any targets. So therefore, remaining it on the UK inventory and accounting towards the UK targets means it's only actually officially accounted for once. That's a short answer, but we can chat more.
All right. I'm sure the panel are very grateful for that answer, Renee. Okay, take another question in the room, see if we've got any online, and then I'm going to move on to the communications and engagement pillar. So this chap here, I'm looking at with a hand up. It's always dangerous to describe people, but there you go, you found the right one.
Hello. Sorry, Tim Stobart from FLS. Just a general question, actually. It's looking at the funding, but at the moment there seems to be, certainly with developers on sites and also just generally in public, a lack of understanding as to what the benefits of restoring peatland is. And generally what we're talking about today in terms of community benefits, we're looking at volunteer benefits and not actually that wider picture. Is there any plan at the moment to try and get more education into the schools and get that information more widely spread to trickle into general knowledge and subsequently increase the pressure politically on how important it is, because people are hearing about it from their kids there. So yeah, just generally trying to identify an opportunity in terms of putting more pressure on the funding stream for the entire school system. So yeah, general question about education and trying to get the knowledge out there.
Yeah, okay, great. All right. So I'll just filter that slightly, and I'm going to break my own rule, and I'm going to ask each country to respond to that. So it's really about, I think, you know, how we elevate the value of peatlands to wider society and translate that to influence our politicians and decision makers. So you've all got plans at various stages. So what's your plan?
Well, in Scotland we have a peatland restoration delivery 1 plan that has that I could talk to you about for a long time, but I won't. But we have various different work streams within that plan. It's collective priority actions that the delivery partners have all signed up to. And there's a huge part of that is about comms. There's another huge part of that about skills. There's lots of people probably in the room here that could talk to that more than myself. But yeah, it's very much about that. It's about kind of getting the peatlands into the psyche. Just from a personal reflection, yesterday my kids went to Flanders Moss, which is a wonderful bog managed by Nature Scott, and they actually did peatland restoration. So we're doing it in Scotland. The kids get it as well. Like, they come back and they're all like, they all know about bogs, and they were telling me how to do it all. So I totally agree. It's about getting the kids. They totally love it as well, and they get the magic of it, I think, as well. Well, I certainly see that in my own kids. So I completely agree. We need to do more here, more there, and we're really thinking about that as well. So thanks.
Manon, what's happening in Wales?
Yep, thank you. Absolutely agree with you. We need to get the message out as quickly and early as possible in the children's development. So in Wales, we're very fortunate with MPAP. We've got a communications plan. And as part of that, you know, we've already heard about the work of Manon Aust and the work she did there with specific schools at Anglesey to teach them about the value of peat. So our ambition again is that we'll get more comms resource into the programme, and that we do share it widely. You know, from my own personal experience, I was hooked on peatlands because somebody from CCW came to the farm one day and started talking about, you know, these amazing plants and that had there, you know, we had orchids, we had sundews, and I was only about that high, and that's why I'm here today. So whether that's a good or the bad thing, but equally, you know, get the hooks in early, and we're really passionate about that in Wales, definitely. Thank you, very good question.
Yeah, thank you. I agree, a very good question, and this is something we were just talking about at lunchtime today, about how changing the behaviour, you really have to start young and being at primary school level to get the message to come home to the older generations. And our draft Peatland Strategy does have an objective in it to develop education and knowledge transfer programmes, and we're fortunate in Dara that actually one part of our department is the College of Agriculture, Food and Rural Enterprise. So we have an opportunity, it's within our gift, to work with our colleagues in the college to get those key messages out at all levels of all ages, because we work with primary school children who are coming into open days, and we've also our own students who are aged 16 and above, and they're young people who are in many cases going back to the family farm and taking those key messages back, and they're learning about the value of peat and peatland and restoration and agri-environment schemes and ways of managing land to restore and maintain restored peatland. So if you ask me if I think there's enough being done, I think there's more we could do, and I think building on that education and knowledge and communication awareness programme is really key to changing the language around peatland. And just to add on to that, I think from our perspective, having the Climate Change Act now in legislation, where we actually have legal commitment to meet carbon reduction targets, and that peatland restoration is really key to doing that. That the language and the education around climate change, I think we'll be able to build that peatland message into that as well. And outside of the other messages that are more commonly known about reducing the use of fossil fuels, etc., that are probably more in the public psyche. But I think peatland restoration is something that we're going to have to definitely get out there in very sort of clear communication and education programmes.
Okay, Kate, are you going to
Yeah, from an England
England
perspective, I think, some of the Nature for Climate grant scheme so far has supported comms and engagement work, and I think there's more that can be done there. I think a lot of peatland partnerships in England are already doing a lot of good work in this comms and engagement space. I think when we went for Moors for the Future, is it called the Bogtastic Van or something like that, that we saw that goes out into local communities, so that's really good. I think policy-wise, we have a sector capacity action plan, and sort of as part of that plan, we'd hope to do more community building and engagement spaces like that. Obviously, that's a plan that's reliant on funding through an SR and all the rest of it. But I definitely think we have ambitions to do more in this space if we can. But like I say, a lot's luckily already happening at a local level. This is a slightly off-piece reflection, but I'm always intrigued by that RSPB TikTok that's like completely changed and is very like trying to appeal to a younger generation. And I think it would be so interesting to see how something like that maybe influences people's views in years to come, and it's vastly different, I think, how they were managing their social media channels before, and see how that influences public perception. And I don't know if we have to think more broadly and really differently about some comms stuff.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, just to add from Natural England's perspective, Nature for Climate Peatland Grant Scheme has funded engagement and communication activities across all its partner projects. There is quite a lot going on there. Internally within Natural England, National Nature Reserve, colleagues do have their own internal budgets for communication and engagement, and from that we've seen several products, and they're day in, day out, they're doing that engagement on the reserves. So we have introduced things. There's several area teams have produced books, children's books on that. My own team has produced a game called Pete the Lapwing, so there's a bit of a plug there. If anybody would like to see that, please come to the exhibition space. We will have that up and running hopefully later on if we can get the Wi-Fi working. But those products are there, standalone, that can be used for anyone's engagement as well. And we are looking at several other options in the future as well, which may include Lego stop motion animation. But we'll see where that goes. Watch this space.
Okay. Well, look, I think everybody agrees it's something that I think we've always done it, but there's so many more people now doing it. And I think general awareness has really gone up. I think now it's about kind of quality engagement and kind of understanding and communicating the benefits. So it feels to me, and I think the strategy report or strategy review kind of supports this, that we're definitely on an upward trend here. So I think it's just finding lots of new kind of creative ways of engaging people. And I think early evening session is going to kind of delve into that in a little bit more detail. I've just got one question actually I'd like to ask Jess, or so sorry if this is a bit off the cuff. Actually, well, either three of you there really. So coordination and kind of data is kind of flagged up as an issue in the strategy review. So, you know, are there kind of one or two kind of critical bits of data you feel that if there was better coordination would enable us to be able to kind of report against this strategy implementation in a much more effective way?
I think there were sort of a couple of areas that really came out. It is on. Okay.
Just want to stand up.
Do you want me to stand up?
Yeah.
Shall I come over this side? Yeah, I think the agri-environment data is probably not particularly visible, so we don't really understand what's sort of being restored through agri-environment schemes and what sort of extent of restoration. So, for example, I sort of mentioned functional areas of restoration. So if you've undertaken restoration on 1,000 hectares of common land, what area of that's actually functionally restored? And we couldn't find that data, and we kind of asked, you know, partners, and it's just not well sort of understood, whether it's within area teams within Natural England, for example, but also the data that we kind of put together on restoration coming from NGOs and government. Everyone's sort of got it stored in very ad hoc ways, so it's hard to sort of piece it together. So there's a chance that that sort of estimation of the 250,000 hectares could be under, it could be over. We're not, you know, it's quite, so there is definitely a need for that kind of centrally coordinated, probably government-led way of collating the data, which would be absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So I guess what we aimed for with our analysis, like Jess says, the data is very, very difficult to get hold of. It's very, very fragmented. So we kind of aimed to be approximately right rather than totally wrong. So that's sort of where I would stand on the figures. And in terms of what data I feel we need, I mean, it's not the Peatland Programme's responsibility to coordinate and collate this data. We do not have the capacity or the funding or the long-term security to be this data repository. But I think for me, the things that we really need to nail is, like Stuart said earlier, it's balancing the wins against the losses. So we need to start cataloguing the loss and taking the losses seriously, and that can include areas of shallow peat, agricultural peat, areas of development. I think we need to account for, well, there's potential losses in the conservation assessments as well that we also need to be very frank about, and there's some huge data gaps there. And then celebrating the wins as well, so being able to track the positive impact that all of this investment we've spoken about today is having on our peatland condition, so tracking the positive conservation and improvement in status, and then being able to formally catalogue what we mean by restoration. And we have a question online actually as well, just to reflect some of the thoughts from online delegates around whether there will be any sort of security of funding for research and looking to the impact of the scale of this restoration investment that's taking place across the 4 countries. Because I think that's one of the things we also don't know. We've been very careful with our wording in the report to say restoration action taken place to date, because we don't know whether that has restored the peatland or not. So yeah, reflections from the panel just in the last few moments around how the science maybe can feed into giving us this data. Okay.
Yeah, we'll just take 1 or 2 contributions, and then we've got 1 or 2 more questions. Anybody? Yeah, Peter?
Yeah, Good question. We're just about to publish an update of our monitoring strategy, which sort of sets out, the impact of our work. And as part of that, we're also able to provide grants for people to collect data for us. So we'd be delighted to follow up on that question. So, thank you, and we are able to support people who can collect data that is going to support the Scottish Peatland Action Partnership.
Yeah, I would say as well that rather than us, having to really struggle to do this every 5 years, it probably makes sense for us to be able to track things, in a kind of more regular way. So maybe that's us going away and having to think about, what might be the, half a dozen KPIs that could best illustrate progress against this strategy, and then work with you all, to try and collate some data that we can then report on a more regular basis, if that makes sense.
We'd be delighted to join up our strategy with your strategy. And, that's very much one of the themes here, that, we need to get greater integration between people who are working on peatland. It has been quite fragmented. Now our challenge is to bring it together.
Yeah, that's good. This is being recorded, by the way, so we'll hold you to that. That's very good. Right, so chap in the salmon-coloured T-shirt at the back. It's going to be the last question, by the way, from the audience.
I'll be very quick. So I work for Quantar Connect Small. We're a contractor. It's just a follow-up on that. With the expansion of the peatland restoration, the amount of work you're needing to do, seems there'll be a huge amount of post-restoration surveys needed, and again for the peatland code. I mean, is there, you're keen to gather data in Scotland, is there a similar thing in England? Like grant schemes, support, like how are you going to gather that much data?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% clear on this, but it's my understanding that the current grant scheme has in that a mechanism for the recipient of the grant to monitor for a set period afterwards. That obviously needs to feed into something, and it's something maybe Kate wants to elaborate on in a second, but the government is looking at into bringing a central register together so we can bring all that into one place. Specifically within the scheme, we are operating a monitoring and evaluation contract at the moment, whereby it's evaluating the scheme and what monitoring has been done, and the learning from that will be, will feed into kind of other things going forward. As ever, it's still dependent on a spending review, and it's still dependent on if ministers are on board. So I don't know if you want to say anything else there, Kate.
Yeah, it was only on the restoration register, which slightly links to the earlier question. But we've been talking about bringing on board a peatland restoration register, which, we share similar challenges of wanting to know and be able to count whatever's delivered through other schemes towards the long-term targets, because it's all a collective effort. The restoration register, where all the sort of M&E would feed into, we're hoping we can start sort of using it internally maybe next year, and then shortly after that making it a sort of external document that everybody can feed into. So that's really exciting for us. When that comes online, will be good, and we'll find out how much the agri-environment schemes have delivered to.
Okay, brilliant. All right. Sorry if I didn't get to your question. So I'm just going to wrap up and ask you a question really about what we can do for you. So either as the programme or as the community, and the community is representative, of course, of science and policy and practitioners. So so this is your opportunity to kind of direct us a bit. Let's start with England.
Okay, I think for me there's three things at the moment. We're obviously going into that spending review period, and it's a real shame that this couldn't be a few months later, and we would have a bit more clarity on where funding is going. But three things really. First one, we really do need that help. We're developing the peat restoration roadmap in England, and it's currently out for consultation. There'll be some further consultations soon, but yeah, please do engage with that if you can. I think it's really valuable. If you want to see us in the exhibition space, I think most of this room's probably engaged with us at some point on that, but I think yeah, it'll be really valuable going forward. The kind of second thing is around the transition. As we know, Nature for Climate Peatland Grant Scheme finishes in 2026 currently. That transfer of funding is primarily going to go into ELMS at this stage, as far as we know. So again, another ask, please, just to engage in that, because it will be more complex. It's not what we're used to, and I think everybody getting early sight on that can only be a good thing in terms of keeping that momentum for restoration, as we've talked about. And then, yeah, lastly, as we've already discussed it, but a little bit, but as we progress from those deep peats into those shallow peats, we really do need help looking at research and getting that research done to back up our kind of evidence-led approach to getting those soils restored, or other mechanisms such as polyculture. So I'll stop there. I'm sure there's many more.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
For me, it's all of you. Keep being so brilliant. You know, all energy, enthusiasm, and technical skill is why we're all here. You know, this is keeping the theme moving forward. We know that we can improve air quality, we can improve water quality, we can improve the quantity of water out there, and we can reduce flooding just by continuing with what we're doing. You know, each of those elements strikes to the heart of what the Environment Agency wants to do with our communities. So keep going. It's amazing, and I look forward to talking to many of you after this event. Thank you.
Thanks. I was going to say it's sort of about, it's similar, I guess, to what Craig's saying, but it's about sharing that knowledge. I think we learn so much from the technical experts out there. We are not technical people in policy. I think we see sort of the improving our peatlands and the work we need to do there as a series of sort of context-specific challenges. I think every site visit you go on, there's a whole different complication as to doing it that way and doing it that way that we sort of need to glue that all together and give a big overarching framework, but we rely on all that sort of local learning and things like that. So that's probably mine.
Yes, I think from our perspective in Northern Ireland, we are hopefully on the exciting phase of progressing with publication of our strategy, and if we do manage to get it published, that's really only the beginning of our journey, and the hard part then starts with our implementation plan. So I think that's probably where we will need some help and support from the experience in the room, just our next steps in taking that implementation forward, and gathering the data and upscaling our restoration, which we're doing on a relatively small scale at the moment. So it's an exciting time for us, but it's challenging. And I think, you know, the talks this morning, everybody shared the same issues, same challenges, same opportunities, and those are the ones that we're facing as well. So that's where I think we probably will benefit from the experience and the help of others.
Thank you. I think we're due to come back to Northern Ireland, aren't we? I know it's not a kind of set rule, but yeah. Manon?
Thank you. So in terms of NRW and specifically focusing in on IUCN, no pressure, but absolutely, you know, the work you do to facilitate the partnership, we really value that and carry on doing that. And we probably, from, you know, sitting here today, we probably need to be working a little bit closer as countries as well. So absolutely value that aspect of the work. And then the showcasing of good practice, especially kind of on a UK level, looking, for example, at a forested peat, the issues there, and continue your work on the carbon code and developing that for the UK. Absolutely, you know, we need somebody to be developing these mechanisms on a UK level. And then just still providing us with that challenge, you know, holding our feet to the fire to make sure we do as we said we would, basically. So, yeah, just a few there from me. Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Hi, yeah, I think we're super fortunate in Scotland. We've got this amazing scientific community already. I see lots of people in the room here that we already speak to on a regular basis, but I suppose it's just the same sort of themes. Share your research, share what's happening, share your stories, all the sort of, you know, getting those comms out there, all that kind of stuff. So just keep talking to us, and you know, the more challenges we hear and the more opportunities and the more stories we hear, the better, the more knowledgeable we are. So you know, we're unfortunately not out on peat bogs all the time, which much as I would love to be, but you know, so it'd be great just to kind of hear from the you know, from out there what's happening. So please just keep speaking to us, and it's great to see everybody today. Thank you.
What I would like is you to help us with our 3 Ps of peatland. People, we'd like you to help us connect peatland to people. Our second P is priorities. We need evidence so that we can move from hectares to benefits. And the third P is private finance. We do need help, and I will follow up with the gentleman who made the question about the carbon market. So 3 Ps, people, priorities, and private finance.
Okay, very good. Sounded like a politician there at the end. Look, thank you, everybody. And sorry if I didn't get to all of the questions, and I think we managed to pick up a few online. So, look, thank you. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to have to respond to, actually. You know, it's a really honest account. I liked Emma's definition there. Not entirely inaccurate, but not completely wrong. But I think it's a great piece of work, and thank you for the team for doing this. And I feel it is a kind of real milestone, you know, that we can now, I think, more regularly reflect back on. So lots to do, lots of ideas, and lots of opportunity, I think, for us to work together. To kind of start to plug some of these gaps, and we all know the big challenge is to kind of upscale. All right, so thank you for being so patient, listening to all of that in a room with no windows and very little air. Okay, so this is the end of the sitting down bit. You'd be glad to know. So you've got a little bit of time to go and breathe some fresh air.